Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In the heart of Europe, Hungary is shaking Western unity in ways that few could have predicted just a decade ago. By pivoting away from its traditional allies in Brussels and Washington, Hungary is charting a new and controversial course on the world stage. As a member of both the EU and NATO, Hungary's decision to forge deeper ties with China is raising eyebrows across the West, challenging the very foundations of post-Cold War alliances. The country is not only strengthening its economic and diplomatic relations with Beijing, but is also openly courting the BRICS bloc, signaling a bold and deliberate foreign policy shift that is reverberating far beyond its borders. This move is creating new fault lines across the continent, as Hungary's actions force its neighbors and partners to reconsider their own positions in an increasingly multipolar world. The European Union, long seen as a bastion of unity, is now grappling with internal divisions and a growing sense of uncertainty about the future of the European project. The recent expansion of BRICS has transformed it into a formidable counterweight to the G7, offering an alternative vision of global cooperation that appeals to countries seeking greater autonomy from Western influence. Hungary's alignment with this new axis is seen by many as a significant breach in Western consensus, raising questions about loyalty, values, and the future direction of European integration. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán frames this so-called Eastern opening as a pragmatic strategy, arguing that closer ties with the East are essential for Hungary's sovereignty, economic growth, and long-term prosperity. Supporters point to Chinese-funded infrastructure projects and new trade opportunities as evidence of Hungary's growing influence, but critics warn that this approach risks undermining democratic values and embracing authoritarian powers. From blocking EU aid to Ukraine to challenging Brussels on key policy issues, Hungary's actions are increasingly at odds with the rest of the bloc. As a result, Hungary is not just reshaping its own destiny, but also contributing to a broader transformation of Europe's geopolitical landscape. The story of Hungary's pivot is ultimately about the future of Europe itself, about whether the continent will remain united or fracture along new lines of influence and ideology. In a world where the balance of power is shifting rapidly, Hungary's choices today may well shape the destiny of Europe in the 21st century. To truly understand Hungary's current political landscape, we must first revisit its turbulent journey since the collapse of communism. The early 1990s were a time of hope and uncertainty, as Hungarians navigated the challenges of building a new democracy and opening up to the world after decades of Soviet influence. When Hungary joined the European Union in 2004, it was widely celebrated as a symbol of successful Western integration. The country was hailed as a model for post-communist transformation, embracing democratic reforms and economic modernization. For many, EU membership promised prosperity, stability, and a clear break from the authoritarian past. But this optimism began to fade after Viktor Orbán and his Fidesz party returned to power in 2010. Orbán's government introduced the concept of an illiberal democracy, emphasizing national sovereignty, traditional Christian values, and a rejection of what it saw as excessive EU interference. This marked a sharp departure from the liberal democratic ideals Hungary had once embraced, and it quickly led to escalating tensions with Brussels. Through widespread government campaigns, the EU was increasingly portrayed as an overreaching bureaucratic force threatening Hungary's independence. These messages resonated with many citizens, fueling domestic support for Orbán's leadership and deepening the divide between Hungary and its European partners. As a result, Hungary began to wield its EU veto power more assertively, frequently blocking joint decisions and frustrating efforts at European unity. This assertiveness created diplomatic friction, but also allowed Hungary to carve out a more independent role on the international stage. With relations with the West increasingly strained, Budapest sought new partners. Orbán's government turned to Russia and, most notably, China, arguing that Hungary must diversify its alliances and economic ties in a rapidly changing multipolar world. This transformation, from a post-Soviet hopeful to a vocal EU dissident, did not happen overnight. It was the result of evolving ideology, calculated political strategy, and the shifting dynamics of global power. Hungary's path reflects both internal debates and the broader currents reshaping Europe. Today, Hungary's Eastern opening policy stands as a testament to this deliberate reorientation, signaling a new era in the nation's foreign policy and its place in the world. Hungary's eastern opening is a comprehensive strategy to diversify economic and political partnerships, with China at its core. Hungary was the first EU country to join China's Belt and Road Initiative, doubling down even as others like Italy withdrew. Budapest shields China from EU criticism, earning the label China's Trojan horse in Europe. Massive Chinese investments in electric vehicles and batteries are welcomed, positioning Hungary as a tech hub while Brussels debates tariffs. The government touts these deals as essential for growth, arguing Western investors can't compete. Politically, Orbán leverages ties with Beijing to reinforce his image as a strong, independent leader. Chinese validation offers a counter-narrative to EU criticism, bolstering Hungary's illiberal model. The Eastern opening is as much about political leverage as it is about economics. Hungary's growing interest in the expanded BRICS group is a logical extension of its so-called Eastern opening policy, a strategy that has seen Budapest steadily pivot toward non-Western partners over the past decade. This approach is not just about diversifying alliances, but about actively seeking new opportunities beyond the traditional Euro-Atlantic sphere. Today, BRICS represents nearly half the world's population and commands a significant share of global economic output. The group is increasingly positioning itself as a counterweight to Western-led institutions like the EU and the IMF, offering an alternative vision for global cooperation and development. For Hungary, joining or aligning with BRICS opens the door to new markets, expanded diplomatic channels, and access to alternative sources of financing, often free from the political strings attached by the European Union. This could mean more flexibility for Hungarian businesses and greater autonomy for the government in shaping its economic future. The bloc's core principles of national sovereignty and non-interference strongly resonate with Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's government, which has long bristled at what it sees as excessive EU oversight and pressure to conform to Western liberal norms. Hungary's vocal support for BRICS signals its ambition to act as a bridge between East and West, leveraging its unique geographic and political position. Some see this as a pragmatic move to hedge its bets in an uncertain world, while critics argue it's a risky gamble that could further isolate Hungary from its European partners. Aligning with BRICS is also a symbolic act of defiance against the liberal international order, one that enhances Hungary's global profile and appeals to nationalist sentiment at home. It's a way for Budapest to assert its independence and challenge the status quo. This move underscores Hungary's deep frustration with the EU's withholding of funds and its ongoing search for greater economic sovereignty. The government hopes that closer ties with BRICS could help offset the financial and political pressures coming from Brussels. Ultimately, Hungary's engagement with BRICS is about asserting its independence and relevance in an increasingly multipolar world, where power and influence are no longer concentrated in the hands of a few Western nations. Hungary's eastward pivot is most visible in its opposition to Ukraine's EU accession. Even after Russia dropped its objection to Ukraine joining the EU, Hungary remains the main obstacle, citing minority rights in Ukraine's Zakarpattia region. Many in Brussels see this as a pretext for leverage on other issues, like frozen EU funds, and to maintain ties with Moscow. Ukraine's leadership is frustrated, calling Hungary's stance a betrayal of European solidarity. The deadlock delays EU enlargement and undermines the bloc's credibility. Hungary's willingness to block Ukraine's path highlights its prioritization of national interests over collective EU goals. This lone stand starkly illustrates Hungary's divergence from its allies. Hungary's embrace of China's Belt and Road Initiative sets it apart from most of Europe. The flagship Budapest-Belgrade Railway, financed by Chinese loans and built by Chinese firms, is promoted as a game-changer but mired in controversy. Critics question its financial viability, secrecy, and the long-term debt burden on Hungarian taxpayers. The project is seen as serving Beijing's interests, creating dependency and a corridor for Chinese goods into Europe. Italy's withdrawal from the Belt and Road highlights Hungary's isolation within the EU on China policy. By welcoming Chinese factories and subsidies, Hungary risks undermining the EU's industrial strategy and creating an uneven playing field. This economic gamble could bring growth or deepen dependencies and fragment the European market. Hungary's path is a high-stakes bet on China, with consequences for the entire EU. Hungary's foreign policy challenges the very cohesion of the European Union. The EU's consensus-based foreign policy is paralyzed when Hungary breaks ranks on China, Russia, or Ukraine. This constant friction consumes diplomatic energy and weakens the EU's global standing. Hungary's alignment with authoritarian powers is seen as a betrayal of EU values, deepening ideological rifts. External powers exploit these divisions, bypassing EU institutions by dealing directly with Budapest. Hungary's actions enable fragmentation, making unified EU strategy difficult. The crisis has sparked calls to reform the unanimity rule and even consider a multi-speed Europe. Hungary's challenge forces the EU to confront its own vulnerabilities and the limits of unity. Dr. Alina Vasilenko of the European Council on Foreign Relations calls Hungary's pivot a high-risk gamble disguised as sovereignty. While Orban claims to maximize Hungary's advantage by playing East against West, the reality is growing dependency on China, with opaque deals and imported labor. This is less partnership, more clientelism. Hungary risks trading one form of dependence for another. Politically, blocking EU consensus isolates Hungary from the very community that underpins its prosperity. Alienating key partners for short-term gains erodes trust and could leave Hungary without support when it needs it most. Russia's recent move on Ukraine exposed Hungary's obstructionism as self-serving, not principled. The veto is used as a bargaining chip, not for genuine national interest. This strategy, Dr. Vasilenko warns, damages both Hungary's security and the EU's integrity. Hungary's pivot to the east is a stress test for the European project at a critical juncture. The EU's ability to act as a coherent global power is at stake, as internal cracks threaten to widen. Managing dissent without sacrificing core principles is the immediate challenge. The situation forces a debate on reforming decision-making and tying membership benefits to shared values. Hungary's story reflects a global trend, nations reassessing allegiances in a multipolar world. Domestic politics, identity, and ambition are reshaping international relations in unpredictable ways. The choices made in Budapest will have far-reaching consequences for Europe's future. The path Hungary takes today may well shape the continent we all share tomorrow.